It's no secret that the Vita was absolutely slaughtered in the handheld market by the pressure of next-gen consoles and Nintendo's handheld monopoly. What made the system great, and why did it fail? Is it still worth picking up in 2018? Nintendo is and has always been the king of handhelds without a doubt. In 2004, Sony released their answer to that with the PSP. It had mixed reviews, but in Japan there was one game that made it stand out: Monster Hunter. The PlayStation Portable held its ground against the Game Boy Advance and then some, but it still couldn't touch the success of the DS. Rumors of a PSP successor came as early as 2009 and fans were hyped. We didn't really see much other than a prototype that resembled the PSP Go, but in January of 2011, codenamed Next Generation Portable or NGP, was announced to be a portable gaming device which aimed at achieving PS3 quality visuals. At E3 2011, it was revealed as the PlayStation Vita. Just like its older brother, the Vita's amazing screen blew the competition away. The Vita's OLED screen is still one of the best on the market. The Vita utilized two touchscreens, one on the front and one on the back. These proved to be more gimmicky than anything, as most game developers more or less ignored this feature. It has a quad-core processor and a quad-core GPU, making it the most powerful handheld of its time. And did this thing have some amazing games? Gravity Rush, Danganronpa, Persona 4 Golden, Final Fantasy X and X-2 Remastered, Wipeout 2048, Uncharted Golden Abyss, and many more classics. It's also one of the best platforms for indie titles. What about those Japan exclusives? One of the greatest things about the Vita is that it was the only flagship handheld at the time to be completely region-free. This means that it only takes a Japanese PSN account to download from the Vita's vast library of Japanese exclusives. Or you could just buy their physical copies and stick with your current account. The Vita was pitched as a console-grade handheld, and in most cases it really lived up to that. The Vita was certainly no slouch when it came to good games. If Vita games aren't enough for you, the Vita supported a good bit of PSP and PS1 classics through the PlayStation Store. While you can't get as many classic titles on the Vita as you can on the PS3, this was still a great option to play classic games. You can even play PS4 games from anywhere with a Wi-Fi connection with remote play, as long as your PS4's Wi-Fi connection is strong enough. If you're looking to do this, I recommend connecting an Ethernet port to the back of the console, as the PS4's wireless chip isn't the greatest. The Vita had promise, and a lot of it at that. On its own, it really is a fantastic piece of hardware. Even so, the PlayStation Vita's death came earlier than any of us wanted. If you were to ask Sony why the Vita failed, they would blame the rise of smartphone gaming. This is simply not true. The overwhelming popularity of the Nintendo Switch has proved that there is still a very high demand for dedicated handheld gaming systems. As I said in my last video going over the Switch's flaws, the Switch doesn't even have media apps other than Hulu. It stood its ground as a dedicated gaming handheld first, and look how great it's doing. A lot of people blame the Vita's high price point of $250 for its downfall. This shouldn't be blamed either, as the 3DS also launched at $250. The 3DS was struggling until Nintendo dropped its price, but the PS Vita could have done the exact same thing, but instead, Sony threw the towel and refused to budge. They did eventually drop the price, but it was already too late at that point. While the standard for internal storage is normally 32 gigs, the PS Vita had an overwhelming storage size of 1. This means that getting a memory card for your Vita is absolutely mandatory. This is, no doubt, one of the main contributing factors of the Vita's failure. And I'm not talking about the fact that you need a memory card to begin with. An 8GB memory card on the Vita is $34.99. 16 gigs, $39.99. A 32GB memory card is $59, and lastly, a 64GB memory card is $87.99. That's ridiculous. You can get a 128GB microSD card for only a few dollars more than Sony's 8GB memory card. That's unacceptable. The Nintendo 3DS accepted SD cards when it launched 10 months before the Vita. You'd think they would at least add SD port on their second model, right? Nope. Unfortunately, you're stuck with overpriced memory cards. If the Vita supported SD cards, or at least if the memory cards weren't so expensive, consumers wouldn't be as hesitant to buy the Vita. The PS Vita is a seriously beautiful console, one that would outperform any other handheld if it had the same classic library as its older brother, the PSP. Its ergonomic and comfortable controller layout combined with its gorgeous OLED display would have made a fantastic way to play your old PS1 and PSP games. While the PS Vita did support some PS1 and PSP classics, it didn't support many. Another really big missed opportunity is the lack of PS2 ports. It's no secret that they really could have done better. Atlus remastered one of its top-selling games, Persona 4, which was originally released on the PS2. To this day, this game is among the top 10 in the Vita's best-selling chart. Square's Final Fantasy X and X-2 remaster is also among the top 10 of the same list. If Sony made a true effort to revive its classic library on the Vita, it might be in a much better situation, especially given the 90s revival going on these days. It's a shame that the Vita had so many missed opportunities. One of the biggest selling points of the Vita, as said before, was that you could get a console-like experience from a handheld unit, and for a while you really could. There were some good AAA titles coming out on the Vita. After the first wave of AAA titles on the Vita, however, the quality of said AAA games dipped down dramatically. We stopped seeing quality exclusives coming to the Vita, and we stopped seeing PS3 to Vita cross-platform titles that really made the Vita look worthwhile. We got more spin-offs and half-baked AAA games more than anything. Above all, the single biggest reason that the PS Vita failed is that Sony chose to ignore it. Sony hardly released any first-party PS Vita games. They released Uncharted Golden Abyss, which is, by the way, a very compelling reason to own a Vita, and it's a launch title. They released PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, Gravity Rush, and only a handful of other games that really didn't catch much attention. It's really easy to see that Sony didn't use all of its resources to make the Vita the best that it could be, and that's why the Vita failed. So how is the Vita Experience in 2018? Right now, it's mostly a platform for indie games and Japanese visual novels, and it's been that way for a few years. Unless you know what Henkaku is. That's right, the real magic of the Vita in 2018 comes from Henkaku Enzo. Henkaku Enzo is a homebrew enabler for the PS Vita, which allows your Vita to have a custom firmware completely untethered, as long as your Vita is running the 3.60 firmware update. If you updated your Vita like I did, then you won't be able to do this at all. Running Henkaku on your Vita allows for many things to be done, which you couldn't do before. You can emulate different consoles using RetroArch like Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, and even PlayStation 1 games. And if you miss the PSP's beautiful layout, you're definitely not the only one, but Adrenaline has you covered with a PSP custom firmware that you can actually load into. With Adrenaline, you can play any PSP ISO in most PS1 ISOs, and if you're up to it, you can even download PS Vita ROMs to play. And remember what I said about those really expensive memory cards? If you use Henkaku, you can use a SD to Vita adapter to actually use your microSD cards, which will save you a lot of money. Now, in no way do I endorse piracy or recommend voiding your warranty. Anything you do to your Vita is at your own risk. It's just really hard not to see how much of the Vita's potential you can unlock by simply soft modding it. If you're interested in doing this, the Vita can be a very valuable system for you in 2018, but if you want a genuine experience, there are a lot of good games out there to try, but don't expect anything new to come out. What you see is basically what you get. Now, if you don't have a PlayStation Vita already and you're still thinking about it, this is the year to get one, as Sony is finally about to throw the final nail in the coffin. There are many reports stating that Sony's gonna cease manufacturing for the Vita this year. This means that any Vita you see online will likely rise in price along with any parts and accessories. Along with this, Sony plans to end the PlayStation Plus lineup of games in March 2019. If you're still thinking about buying a Vita, you don't have much time left, so get one before it's too late. That's it guys, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more. This is CRiMKAT, thanks for watching.